I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. And we are still in the book of Acts. Paul has just had his great hearing before King Agrippa and Festus. And as they said at the end of chapter 26, if he had not appealed to Caesar, they could have just let him go. There was nothing wrong. See, Agrippa, as Paul said, is an expert in the Christian and Jewish traditions. He understands the scriptures, he understands the customs. After hearing Paul, he says, we could have let him go. But he appealed to Caesar, and because he appealed to Caesar, we have to send him to Caesar. That's where we left this. We're going to pick it up now in chapter 27. And again, there are no Joseph Smith translations in this chapter, so we will not be reading that. Acts chapter 27. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coasts of Asia, one Aristarchus of Macedonia of Thessalonica being with us. The next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul, and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us thereon. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete, over against Salmone, and hardly passing it, came unto a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lycia. Now, when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading and ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phenice, and there to winter, which is an haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind called Euroclydon, and when the ship was caught, and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. And running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. And we being exceedingly tossed with the tempest, the next day they lightened the ship, and the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. So far this is just recounting their journey, of course. Notice that Luke is still with him because this is in the first person. So they leave Caesarea on the ship, they sail, they're going to follow the coastline of Asia out to Italy. Now this means Asia Minor, and they go up first to Sidon, which is still along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, but then they go along the southern coast of what is Asia Minor, along the north of the Mediterranean. They stop at Myra, which is on the mainland. Cnidus is a small island off the kind of southwest corner of Asia Minor. They then sail down to Crete, and they land in the Fair Havens, which is on the southern end of Crete, near the center of the island, southern end. They don't want to stay here for the winter. Apparently it's not a good place for winter. They don't want to go far. They're going to the other to the western end of Crete. This isn't that far away. And when the wind starts blowing favorably, they all jump in the ship and they go. But Paul warns them. Paul tells them, don't do this. This is going to be bad timing if we leave right now. They don't listen to him. They jump in the ship and they try to sail away from Crete, and almost immediately a massive storm rages and blows them away from shore. And they are now several days out to sea They can't see the sun or the stars. They don't know how many days it has been. They have to strake the sail, meaning they bring the sail down because the wind is so violent and turbulent that it's damaging the sail. They just have to bring the sail down, let the waves carry them where it will. And they keep lightening the ship. They throw out the tackling of the ship and all this. This is the ropes and stuff that would be used to tie the sails down, tie stuff down with. They got to get rid of it all because the storm is so violent that it's threatening to sink the ship. Now, what does it mean that the centurion is of Augustus's band? The best explanation I can find for that is that Herod the Great, had renamed the area of Samaria Augustus in honor of Caesar Augustus. And Caesarea, the city, is within the region of Samaria, or in the region of Augustus. And so this would be of Augustus's band, would mean that he is a cohort. He is a centurion from a cohort, which would be what the band is, that was raised from the local population of the Samarian area. That's the best explanation I can find. Anyways, let us continue. Verse 21. But after long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them, and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God that it shall be even as it was told me. Howbeit, we must be cast upon a certain island. But when the 14th night was come, as we were driven up and down in Adria, about midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded, and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again, and found it 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest we should have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern, and wished for the day. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, under color, as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, Except these abide in the ship, they cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat, and let her fall off. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, This day is the 14th day that ye have tarried and continued fasting, having taken nothing. Wherefore I pray you to take some meat, for this is for your health. For there shall not an hair fall from the head of any of you. And when he had thus spoken, he took bread, and gave thanks to God in presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then were they all of good cheer, and they also took some meat. And we were in all in the ship 260 souls. And when they had eaten enough, they lighted the ship, and cast out the wheat into the sea. And when it was day, they knew not the land. But they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into the which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves unto the sea, and loosed the rudder bands, and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind, and made toward the shore. And falling into a place where 2 seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the forepart stuck fast, and remained unmovable. But the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves, and the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land, and the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. This is a nice story. They're at sea, the storm's raging for 14 days, and then Paul comes to us, oh, don't worry, we're all going to be saved. The angel appeared to me last night, told me it's all going to be safe because I have to go to Rome, and God has said that you can all come, you can all be saved with me. Now, they get there, they're coming to the land, they see a shore, they take the sounding, 20 fathoms deep, then they go a little closer, get 15 fathoms, then they drop their anchors to hold the ship in place. But they fear running aground on the rocks, and so a number of them are going to get onto the lifeboats. and drop the lifeboats over and try to row to shore. And Paul warns them, if anybody gets off the ship now, they will die. If you stay on the ship, you will survive. But if you get off the ship, you're dead. And so the centurion has them cut all the lifeboats off and throw them into the ocean so that nobody can get on. But then Paul, it's coming on to the 15th day, Paul says, look, you guys have been fasting for 2 weeks. Take something to eat. And he sits down and he blesses it, he eats it, and they all have a good feast. Once they have eaten, they again unload everything they can to make the ship lighter. They toss out all the wheat. This was the cargo. Then they start sailing for shore. They find a creek. They can say, hey, we can get into there, we'll be safe. But as they approach it, they run aground, and the back half of the ship is destroyed. It breaks off. Now, the other soldiers want to kill the prisoners so that none escape. But the centurion likes Paul. And he understands, Paul has said that they will all make it off alive if they follow Paul, basically. And so he says, no, we're not killing anybody. If you can swim, swim. If you can't, grab a board and float to shore. And they all make it. 276 people on the ship, not a single person dies, because they followed Paul. So quite the adventure for Paul. We're going to end it here, picking it up in chapter 28. This is the last chapter in the book of Acts, so I will see you there.